It was a busy Friday evening, and the manager was about to ask yet another loiterer to leave. His eyes landed on a worn-looking woman and her small son, who seemed to have been sitting at the corner booth for far too long without ordering. With a frustrated sigh, he started toward them, ready to politely but firmly enforce the cafe's policy. But then, the little boy moved, and a small, crumpled piece of paper fluttered from his pocket onto the floor. What was written on that note would stop the manager in his tracks and change his heart forever. Our story begins with a woman named Clara and her 7-year-old son, Leo. Clara worked 2 jobs, one at the laundress in the early mornings and another cleaning offices late into the night. In between, in the precious hour she had with her son before her evening shift, she would take him to the cozy, bustling cafe near the park. It was their ritual, their tiny island of normalcy in a sea of struggle. She couldn't afford the hot chocolates or the pastries that made Leo's eyes light up, but the manager, a man named Mr. Evans, had once said it was okay if they just sat for a while to get out of the cold. That was months ago. Mr. Evans had forgotten his own moment of mercy. On this particular evening, Clara was more tired than usual. The weariness wasn't just in her bones, it was in her spirit. Rent was due, and the winter coat Leo desperately needed was still just a dream on a store mannequin. She guided Leo to their usual booth, giving him a small notebook and a pencil to draw with. "You make us a beautiful picture, my love," she whispered, her voice thin with fatigue. She then opened her own worn ledger, carefully counting and recounting a small handful of coins and bills, her brow furrowed in silent calculation. From across the room, Mr. Evans watched them. He was a good man, but he was stressed. A supplier had overcharged him, a staff member had called in sick, and the cafe was packed. His earlier patience had worn thin. He saw Clara with her papers and no menu, and he assumed the worst, that she was taking advantage of his once-offered kindness. He didn't see a hard-working mother. He saw a table that could be turned over to paying customers. He decided it was time to speak to them. As he weaved through the tables, his mind rehearsed the polite but firm speech. "I'm sorry, but if you're not ordering, I'll have to ask you to free up the table for other guests." He was just a few steps away when Leo, reaching for his pencil, accidentally knocked his small notebook off the table. A single torn sheet of paper, folded many times, slipped out and landed at Mr. Evans's feet. Instinctively, the manager bent to pick it up. He meant to simply hand it back, but the paper had fallen open. His eyes, almost against his will, scanned the large, careful, penciled letters a child would make. It wasn't a drawing. It was a list. At the top, it read, "My savings plan." Underneath, in 2 columns, "For Mom, coffee for her birthday, 25C, new gloves, C. A day off, save a lot. For me, hot chocolate, 50C, comic book, $1. But it was the note at the bottom that made Mr. Evans's breath catch in his throat. Under a shaky, heartbreakingly earnest drawing of a stick figure woman holding a stick figure boy's hand, it said, "I'm saving for Mom. She is tiered. I want to buy her a whole day of rest. I love her." The words, "I'm saving for Mom," seemed to pulse on the page. Mr. Evans stood frozen, the noise of the cafe fading into a distant hum. He looked from a note to the booth. Leo was looking up at him, his eyes wide with a mixture of apology for dropping something and the innocent fear of a grown-up's disapproval. Clara had finally noticed the manager standing there. She followed his gaze to the note in his hand, and her face flushed with a deep, humiliated pink. She thought she was about to be shamed, to be exposed as a failure in front of her son. "Leo, what did you drop? Give it back, please," she said softly, her voice tight, reaching out her hand. But Mr. Evans didn't hand it back. He clutched the little piece of paper as if it were a sacred text. All his frustration, the supplier, the busy night, the stress, melted away, replaced by a wave of such profound shame and clarity that it nearly buckled his knees. He had been so blind. He saw the truth now. The careful mend in Clara's sleeve, the way Leo's shoes were a size too small, the profound dignity in Clara's tired eyes, even as she prepared for his reprimand. He wasn't looking at loiterers. He was looking at a monument of love, a small boy on a mighty mission. The speech he had prepared died on his lips. Instead, he slowly knelt down beside their table, bringing himself to Leo's eye level. His own eyes had grown misty. "Young man," Mr. Evans began, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. Is this your savings plan?" Leo nodded shyly, glancing at his mother. Clara was speechless, confused by the manager's sudden change in demeanor. "It's just his little game," Clara started, trying to deflect, to protect her son's dream from the harsh light of reality. "He doesn't understand. He understands more than most of us," Mr. Evans interrupted gently, his gaze still on Leo. He pointed to the last line. "You want to buy Mom a whole day of rest." Leo nodded again, more firmly this time. "She works all the time. Her hands hurt. I want her to sleep in and have coffee that's not from the pot at work." Mr. Evans looked up at Clara. He saw not a burden on his business, but a warrior, a mother fighting a quiet, endless battle. And her lieutenant, this small boy with a big heart and a crumpled savings plan. "Well," Mr. Evans said, clearing his throat. He stood up, but his posture was no longer that of a manager about to evict. It was of a host. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding. This table is for guests of the cafe, and as our guests, you really must try our special hot chocolate. And we have a new pastry today, too many, in fact. They'll go stale if someone doesn't help us out." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked swiftly toward the kitchen, the note still in his hand. Clara and Leo could only stare after him, bewildered. A few minutes later, a waitress arrived, not with a bill, but with a tray laden with 2 steaming, lavish hot chocolates topped with whipped cream, 2 of the cafe's most beautiful pastries, and a pot of fresh coffee for Clara. "Compliments of the house," the waitress said with a warm smile. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but they were tears of a different kind now. They were tears of being seen. Leo's face was a picture of pure, unadulterated joy. "Mom, look, it's the hot chocolate from a picture." But the story didn't end there. As they were finishing, Mr. Evans returned. He placed a small, sealed envelope on the table next to Clara's hand. "This," he said quietly, "is a thank you. Thank you for reminding me what this place is really for. It's not just about transactions. It's about being a part of the community, a refuge." Inside the envelope was not just a gift card for the cafe. There was a cash amount, carefully saved by the staff from a kindness jar they kept in the back, that matched exactly what a whole day of rest might cost. And a note, this time in Mr. Evans's handwriting. "For the bravest manager I know, the one who manages a heart full of love. Your table is always waiting." Clara tried to protest, to give it back, but Mr. Evans simply shook his head. "Let him be your hero," he said, nodding toward Leo, who was carefully wrapping half his pastry in a napkin. "For later, Mom," the little boy explained. As they left the cafe that night, bundled up against the cold, the world felt a little softer, a little kinder. Leo held his mother's hand tightly, believing with all his heart that his savings plan had worked a miracle. And in a way it had. It hadn't bought the day of rest. Not yet. But had bought something even more precious, a reminder of our shared humanity. Mr. Evans watched them go from the window. He had taped Leo's crumpled note to the corner of his office computer. It was his new mission statement. He learned that day that the greatest lessons in kindness and courage don't come from boardrooms or business plans. Sometimes they come on a piece of lined paper, in the hopeful handwriting of a child, reminding us that love has a plan. It's always saving up for a miracle. Sometimes, the most profound wisdom is whispered in a child's innocent words. That little note, "I'm saving for Mom," was more than a list. It was a lesson in love, a map to what truly matters. It reminds us to look beyond the surface, to see the quiet battles and the beautiful hearts fighting them. Share this story if it reminded you that hope is often found in the smallest, most honest places.